Hello and welcome. My name is Todd Hutchison, and in this session I want to talk about vehicle surveillance from the investigator's perspective. Now, surveillance as a term means to closely observe, and in a vehicle scenario it generally means to follow a subject from place to place and ideally without their knowledge. To discuss vehicle surveillance we have to talk about 5 key factors. Firstly, your vehicle. Secondly, the tools of the trade available to the investigator. Thirdly, the subject's vehicle and its identifying characteristics. Fourthly, the subject themselves who is under study. And lastly, the environment we are operating within. This includes the jurisdictional boundaries, the laws, the weather, the time of day and even the road conditions. Let's start with your vehicle. Your aim is to blend in, put another way, fit into your surroundings, so you're not particularly noticeable. The James Bond Aston Martin routine is not an option, sorry about that. You effectively don't want anything to stand out. That means driving around in a Lamborghini or a bright yellow car or something with unique symbols or paintwork. It just doesn't work. A sedan type vehicle is likely best, although it does not give you that height advantage, but a 4-wheel drive, well, that will be larger and likely more noticeable. A silver car is often considered least noticeable on the road as it typically blends in. That's why if you look at insurance claims, often people are pulling out in front of those silver cars. So that means it's pretty good at blending in. Alternatively, having a white car works well as well because it's one of the most common colours out there. Now of course, if you have a common type of vehicle, even better. A particular highly manufactured make and model, then that is a great option. Well, sadly, you have to become Mr. or Mrs. Average, who just blends into the scene. Now let's talk about accessories on your car. Most late model cars come with the reverse camera. Although you don't want to be sitting there in reverse because that will attract attention by the lights or sometimes even a beep some vehicles have. But you could actually set up a camera that's actually positioned in the same location, but it's a permanent camera bringing into a monitor inside the car. Of course, the all-important GPS or global positioning system, my favourite tool. This allows you to get a helicopter view of the street map and where you're actually heading. Great to preempt options of where the person may be turning because you can see exactly when the streets are coming up, whether a T-junction, if it's going left or it's going right, and then you can judge where they are in terms of the lane and the speed they're actually doing. In some older cars, these are not fitted, so you may need to get a mobile one fitted at least. Slightly tinted windows will kind of be useful because they'll tend to block a subject when they're looking at the investigator. And sometimes they're actually looking through you, so they're not necessarily looking at you, so just be careful. That means that they can also block out those dangerous sun rays because as investigators we can be stuck in cars for long periods of time. Now another great feature of modern cars is fog lights. For example, during night driving as you're moving in and out behind trucks, you might alternate between you having your main lights on, your fog lights on, or the combination. And what this could do is if someone's looking in their rear vision mirror, look like you're multiply different cars. So therefore there's not one particular car following them. Now let's talk about the tools of the trade or the accessories to purchase. Luckily these days there are tracking devices that can be already installed in vehicles by the owner. Or you can get these mobile devices that temporarily can be installed or magnets that can be clipped onto the shell of the car in a place that's not noticed. Now you must note your local laws here because they may inhibit you placing any form of tracking device on any private property without the consent of the owner, as this can be a violation of their privacy or against acceptable social norms. However, in the case of an investigation of following a spouse, the other party, your client, may be happy for you to put things on the car. Or they might be happy to install on the person's face a smartphone what we call the Find My Device function. These Find My Device functions are incredible. Basically, they are just an app you install and it actually allows you to identify via tracking via the GPS of where it actually is currently located. Interestingly, some of them don't even need to be powered on, as the tracker will show their last known location. They generally allow you to remotely track, lock and erase data on a lost or stolen phone. The device generally needs a Find My Device type application installed and has to be GPS enabled. They can show their map location or they can also often be made to ring the phone. Obviously, if we're being used for tracking, we don't want the phone going off. We need just access to that application to see the location. So therefore, you'd only be able to get that through the person that's actually got that access. This is somewhat similar to law enforcement option that uses a method called triangulation between communicating mobile network towers. So what happens when the phone turns on, it goes to register with its close tower, but it actually gets picked up with other towers. And based on the signal strength, it can actually work out by looking at, say, 3 towers to where exactly it's located, which ones it's closer to, which one it's further away from, and it can actually be calculated the general direction. It transmits even if you're not on a call, because it has to tell the network, hey, I'm here. So if you get a phone call to me, please let me know I'm here, and put it through these particular cell networks. This option will not be available to you typically as a private investigator. Now, getting back to all that important GPS or global positioning system, this gives the investigator insight to the options of road turns ahead, or it can show the pathways to known locations. So you could actually work out where they're trying to go if you've done your research before. It allows you to be able to understand the road layout. This may even be useful for looking for shortcuts when you have to skip through an area because you're falling behind or you have to get in front of them. This reminds me of a vehicle surveillance I was doing and catch it on video. I was following this subject at night on the freeway. There were speed limits put in place because there was road works being carried out at the same time. There was not a lot of traffic on the road, and for me to kind of hide behind, it was just basically me and them. They suddenly slowed down. So much so that I had to make a decision that I had to effectively pass them, because I tried slowing down, but then they were going so slow, I'm thinking they could be onto me. In fact, I thought my cover was blown. I did go past them and I took the first exit. But I rushed through up to the exit because it went up on an incline, so I could get up to the top. Luckily the light went green, I went through the intersection, and at that peak I could actually see where the vehicle was. Because it was going so slow, and now I knew obviously it wasn't about me, they're just going slow for some reason, because as I did go past them I looked over and they seemed to be playing with something, so they weren't really looking at me. But because they were going so slow I could actually see them, but other cars had caught up to them at that stage. So I was able to speed on the on-ramp to catch up with them. The other cars, because they're around, allowed me to then hide behind them, and I could then start tracking the car, and I was able to be successful by keeping that safe distance and following them to the next destination. But when you looked at it, it was fairly risky on having to do that. But sometimes you feel that you may be compromised and you have to take a switch. So it gets them feeling like you weren't following them after all. Now back to the tools. As the GPS gives you a layout of the roads, you can determine the options ahead. This is taken in context to the actual road. So you can see, are we coming up to a T, or are we coming up to a left turn, right turn? And sometimes when you're, say, on a freeway, you'll actually know, well, they're not going to stop or park. So the options become simply that they're going straight, or they'll take the next exit. Now, depending on the lane they are in, it also gives you a potential to make a decision whether they are preparing to exit or not. So you just have to position yourself well. You don't want to be looking like you're following them on each lane. Now, when you're on a straight suburban road, well, they're either going to be driving forward, they could be turning left, they could be turning right, they could be stopping or pulling over. This means that if we have a multi-lane road, by looking at which lane they are in, it gives us a sense of what their options are, and they'll be therefore reduced. Because, for example, in the left lane, they're only going to be able to go forward or turn left. But if they then move over to the right lane, then you can see they're either going to go forward or turning right. Luckily, when a person generally changes their speed or they put indicators on, these are all clues that they're about to turn and sometimes to stop. So we have to then take corrective action. Now, if the GPS indicates that you're coming to a no-through road, you better back off on your distance, because you only really want to see where they are going, what driveway they're pulling into. But if they see you and it's a no-through road, not many houses down there, then they might think it's really sus. Sometimes in that scenario, you just pull across and you'll let them park at their own time. You'll typically get out of your car and you'll go as close as you can to try and determine where is the car parked. If they did go into a garage, generally there'll be a light. You'll see the gap around the garage light if you're at night. So you might be able to work that out without giving away that you're actually in a vehicle. Now, GPS can make it very clear where you're actually located, which is great because then you've got road names. Particularly important if you're working in a team to be able to keep up with where your location is. Very important for police pursuits because someone has to be radio in saying where they're going and where they're heading and what road they're actually on and in what direction. The next tool to discuss is the dashboard cam or the dash cam, which is a video or an audio recording device typically used that is mounted on either the windscreen or on the dash. This may be your core source for evidence gathering, particularly in the event of a motor vehicle accident. You'll need to make sure that you have adequate memory, which are typically little cards that get slotted into them. And therefore, you buy them separately and you have to push in to have them recording. Of course, if the higher resolution which you want in a video, generally that will actually take more power or use more memory. But you know what? That's one thing you don't want to skimp on. You definitely want to buy the highest resolution camera. There's no use having footage if you can't see the people or read the registration numbers, etc. You may have more than one to cover multiple angles. You could have a vehicle with a number of them. Although you don't want to look like a private investigator if someone does come up to the vehicle. You don't want to look suspicious. Your mobile phone can be used also as a recording device, capturing video and audio and even your dialogue. It is your mobile CCT device really. These devices should be set with the date and time stamp and the video as extra validation of the day and the time of the recording. Now be aware, however, that if they've come to the end of their memory, a lot of those devices start re-recording over what they had before. So if you've got key evidence, please either remove the card or turn the device off, because you would hate it to re-record over itself and lose that. Now when driving, you're recommended to have a pad and a paper handy as well. I often take notes or write down registration numbers, etc. And sometimes other things like a torch, maybe even one of those ones with a camera in it as well as a dual purpose. What about binoculars? Although if you have those sitting around and you're looking out at them, you could be a bit more suspicious. So just be a little bit careful of that. If you're doing any form of stakeout or you're doing a lot of foot surveillance, you might need to pack different clothes and different baseball caps, sunglasses, etc. So as you're getting out of the car each time, you might look a little bit different. Sometimes you've been in the car so long, you just need to freshen up. Now sunglasses are good because they help identify your identity, and when you are walking around with a baseball cap, etc., just know that if you walk around with the same baseball cap, you become more familiar. So I don't necessarily recommend that. You're far better off just to try and blend in as much as possible. But if everyone's wearing baseball caps, you wear a baseball cap. But don't wear something that's so unique that it would give a distinctive mark. Of course, if you're setting out for a stakeout, then you'll need drinks and food too. As a last note about equipment, make sure you know how to use it. Check it's actually recording, check it's functioning, check that the date and timestamp is correct. There's nothing worse than missing evidence due to equipment not knowing how to use it properly, or taking too long to turn it on and get it to record mode. If it's a dash cam, you also have to position it well, because sometimes you're missing key information. I know in a vehicle surveying I've done, if it's not wide enough, you often are missing the target as they're moving because it's not capturing the wideness as your eyes do. Now there is also no use recording if the equipment is low quality, guys. Get a good camera, the highest resolution you can afford. But always remember, the higher resolution usually chews more memory cards and takes more power. The next factor to discuss is the subject's car. Obviously, the registration plate provides a unique identifier, that's key. But you're wanting to not only understand the make, the model, the colour of the car, but look for distinguishing features that will help you spot it. The last surveillance I did, there was a yellow pipe on the roof rack of this four-wheel drive. That was such a standout item for me to keep checking in on them, because as they were going in and out of traffic and I was between a number of four-wheel drives that had the same colour, I could have lost them, but this yellow piece of pole was the distinguishing factor that allowed me to know which one exactly I was following. Now these could be anything from mag wheels to stickers to roof racks, side steps, tinting, unusual colour. It could be so many different things. But it'll help you to avoid getting confused between cars, particularly in heavy traffic. Now let's talk about the next key factor, the subject themselves. See, we can get a lot of information from the client before we even start. This allows us to do some background checks on the internet, and those background checks, by the way, there's a lot of information on here, and I've got it on a separate video called Locating Individuals for an Investigation. So go and have a look at that to get you up on that. But finding out more about, for example, where they live, where they work, what gym they attend, what church they go to, that allows you to have a better idea of where they may be heading when you're following them in the car. And if you get that information, you can actually map out to have a bit of a sense of where you're going and what shortcuts there could be. Now, apart from knowing their general destinations, you could use Google Earth mapping image that is readily available on the internet that kind of takes a helicopter view. And that gives you a general feel as to the pathways between, say, their home and their workplace. So you can start looking at where the potential that they could be going. You may want to make particular note of the location of things like petrol stations, ATM, money machines, and supermarkets that they may visit on occasion. And of course, the more you know about them, the more you actually know what their habits are. This means that when it comes to following a subject in a vehicle, you need to plan ahead as much as possible to look at the potential to where they are heading and what options they may take in terms of their travel paths. The last key factor is the environment. This can include the busyness of the traffic, the weather, road conditions, safe speeds, and the distances you can maintain. All these things you need to be aware of so the surveillance is safe and successful. This includes understanding one-way streets, restricted zones. You can think of it and name it. You have to be ready for the unknown, ready to adapt, ready to make instant changes. Of course, even your physical location, the jurisdiction, and the laws and regulations at play can vary. Over time, you get used to looking for certain things, like entry and exit points, free car bays to park in, the best hiding spots, making a call whether it's safe to follow them without being noticed, like driving into a busy shopping centre car park compared to a private property single business car park. Obviously, the latter, you would not follow them in. You get to understand when's the appropriate time to follow them, when's the appropriate time to pull on the side of the road, when's the appropriate time to drive past, chuck a Yui, and then actually come back a bit later. It does take experience, and you get more intuition as you go in where their position of their vehicle, the speed, the angle of it, what they might be actually up to. Of course, the more homework you've done, the more desktop research you've done about them, the far more informed you're going to be. When I follow a subject into a car park, I'm trying to assess how many entry or exit points are there. If there's one, my job suddenly becomes easier, and I might be able to hide in the car park better, as I just have to keep an eye on the exit point, because I might, as part of my surveillance, might not have to keep an absolute sight on that vehicle. Actually, the funny story was, the last one I did at night, I pulled into a shopping centre. It was a small shopping centre, which I didn't know. But I actually looked around, I could only assess that there was one entry point and exit point. So I actually drove past, but once I realised they were parking, I decided that there was no hiding spot outside. So I then moved into the car park and I kept my eyes purely on the exit. See, they were in what I thought was the fast food place, because at the end of the day, there was no real other shops open. So I'm actually imagining they're just picking up food. And it wasn't a restaurant, so they had to just wait the longest period of time, 10-15 minutes for the food to be cooked, and then they would be out and about, then I could follow them out the exit. And I was in a really good hidden location. Well, they took too long. I started to worry that I might have missed an exit or something. So I ended up making a decision to get out of my vehicle and go and actually see and eyeball where they were. And the funny side, I actually found them that there was a laundromat next door to the actual fast food place, and they were in there washing their clothes. I had to laugh, but then, of course, I almost cried, because that means I was going to be waiting for a while because they had a whole pile of washing. Now, when driving into a shopping centre car park, however, you not only have to think about the exit points and entry points for vehicles, but you also got to consider, if you're needing to follow them, of where they're going to get out and which entry of the building are they going to go in. Now, generally, when they go in one entrance, they'll typically come out of that same place as the exit. And this is where you have to get a bit smart. Where do I park my car? What do I have to do? Do I have to be following them in the shopping centre on foot? And of course, if you've got teams, even better, because one person could be following them and the other person's got the car ready. Therefore, we can keep the car at a greater distance. So all these are factors when you have to look at what is the context to the surveillance you're doing. Now, if you are lucky enough to work as a team, try and mix genders. It's far easier to look like a married couple or a couple in a relationship than to see, for example, two men, particularly two men in black as that movie goes. You don't want to stand out. So if you've got a couples, then it looks far easier, and sometimes you have to hold hands or pretend you're kissing, or whatever the case is, to actually look like it's just norm. And of course, what you're wearing is very important. Maybe you need to drop that James Bond look tuxedo type thing you have when you're walking into the shopping centre next time. Now, if they pull into a workplace car park, say a single building car park, well, you're definitely not going to follow them. You'll actually have to drive past them. You have to choose whether you're going to pull up very close, right down the road, and then turning around and coming back. Now, if you've done your research, you're going to have more of an idea where they're likely to go when they come out, whether they'll go left or right, because you don't necessarily want them to drive up to you close and see you and witness you. And of course, make sure you're not doing anything unusual, because that might just attract their attention. So we have to make sure, where's the best spot? Is it better to be facing them, behind them? Where are they most likely to go? And where will I be able to park my car that will be least obvious? And then you have to make a best guess. Which way will they come out? And swinging your car around to follow them could become too obvious. Now, when travelling close, be aware not to be making eye contact or turning your head watching them. Learn to use your peripheral vision. So sometimes that means you can look forward, but you can pick up things on the side, or at least start using your eyes a bit more, which effectively means try and avoid turning your head all the time. Now, learn to watch from moving your eyes as opposed to your head. In the ideal world, you could be set up with dash cams and monitors each side of the vehicle to watch, so you don't have to look at it. And then when you've got your head down, you might be just looking at your mobile phone because it has a Bluetooth or a wireless connection to it, and you could be watching the monitors from there. If they look in your direction and you're looking at the same time, don't make any fast movements to look away. Just act normally. They may have actually been looking towards you but not at you, and any harsh movements of your body will actually catch their eye. Be wary, of course, not to be driving past their home too often, and be aware of those nosy neighbours that may actually come up and talk to you because you've parked in the wrong spot. And of course, avoid parking under a light if it's a night surveillance, or where CCTV may exist. I'll have to tell you a funny story. I actually walked up to an unmarked police car once with a security patrol, which was on a school premises. Unbeknown to us, they were on a stakeout and they'd been watching this drug house across the road, but had parked in the school area in this little hidden area under this bush, and therefore we thought it was a bit sus ourselves and we want to know what they were actually doing. So as we approached them, we heard them say, "Go, go, go," on their handhelds, and then suddenly all these police cars came from nowhere around each street, and all the people in the car jump out, and they ended up being detectives, and they run across the road and go and do their drug bust. I'm pretty sure we actually blew their cover. All this just means be wary where you park. If you're parked at a children's playground, you may attract suspicious and emotional parents, because no one wants people taking photos of their kids these days. It may just look creepy and attract unwanted attention. Now, if you park in a no standing zone, you may attract a parking inspector. And if you block a vehicle, then someone may come and angrily knock on your window to get you to move the vehicle. The key point is that it's not the fact that where you're parking per se, that's the main problem. It's the actual movement of people that then attracts attention. Let me give you an example. Imagine sitting in your vehicle at night. You've got the perfect spot, you're not under a light or anything like that. It just basically looks a vacant car park with this parked car. There's no movement outside. People just basically think that it's empty. It's just parked for the night. But as soon as you jump on your mobile phone, that glow from the phone will tend to be reflected on your face, and any observer will know someone's in the car. Be wary of that. If you're likely to be in a position where people may come over and disturb you, have a credible story ready. For example, if I'm parking in a place where it's like in a suburban neighbourhood and a neighbour comes out, I'll just say, "Oh, sorry, look, I'm picking up my child from a party just down the street, but I got here way too early and I don't want to go up there and disturb them, so I thought I'd just pull along and wait here in the driveway until it gets closer to the time." Now, ideally, if you're going to tell those stories, have some props around, because as I'm talking, I might say, "Oh, you know, my kids," and I'll be pointing some toys in the back of the car. So if it's consistent to support your story, it's going to become more convincing. Now, the days of carrying those large cameras with large big lenses are somewhat past, and they can attract undue attention as to what you're actually up to. For example, we used to use those two-way radios. And therefore, when you had a investigator on foot and the other one in the vehicle, they'd be able to communicate. I used to even use them in television when we were actually chasing someone for the live television trucks to be following. These days, the mobile phone is so common that no one will even notice you if you're walking around talking. Of course, you don't want to talk too loud or be making high, loud laughter. You just want to be as normal as possible. But by doing that, you might actually have it in recording as well, and you might actually be talking very quietly and at the same time capturing some evidence. When waiting in your car, it can become very boring, as we well know. You might become distracted and start playing with things. Be careful not to jump on Facebook, etc., particularly if it's at night because of the glow. But also that you can get distracted easily, and therefore you're breaking your focus. That's when you often miss something key, or you might even miss them and be falling behind. Well, I wish you the very best in your surveillance. Hopefully these tips are very useful to you.